Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. Today we are live in studio for the first time in 2 years and I couldn't be more excited about that, and I'm delighted to introduce you all to Adam Iley from Caplin. Adam, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Listen, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming in. Loads to unpack. I'm excited to welcome you onto the show. We've spoken to Caplin before, but there's so much cool stuff to have on that we're talking to you about right now. Tell us a little bit about yourself first and foremost, and Caplin.
Well, I'm Adam Iley, Director of Engineering at Caplin. I suppose years ago I graduated, I went to work for IBM, doing messaging, all that kind of stuff. I then went off to Switzerland to do some biotech work, which was really interesting. And then I came back to London and I was looking for a place to work before my Masters in Visualization in virtual environments.
Okay.
So it was kind of VR, AR, I was really into it. I thought I'll do a Masters in this. I was just looking for a place to tide me over for a couple of months until that started. And I interviewed at Caplin and I thought, wow, these guys are doing something, this was probably 2006. These guys are doing stuff that I haven't really seen elsewhere. And so I was really excited, really interested. And started working there as a software engineer. Later on, I sort of became a team lead, was focusing on innovation and training and that kind of stuff. And then after a while, I moved on. I went to work for a startup, Improbable Worlds, and then Deutsche Bank. But since then, I've come back. I've come back as Director of Engineering.
The homecoming.
It has been a bit like that, yeah. And actually, it's quite interesting. A lot of people at Caplin do come back, and I think that is a strong recommendation for the kind of culture that we have.
Yeah.
People remember it when in their careers they go elsewhere. They remember it as a place where, you know, they got to do interesting work, they got to work with interesting people, and I think, yeah, it calls people back.
Yeah. Well, listen, I love hearing that as well, and I saw that on your bio about the great return. I'd love to see that and see the development of it. Caplin itself has been doing some really cool stuff. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing over there.
So I guess it all stems way back in the early days of streaming and distribution of financial data. So that's kind of where it starts. But then on top of that, we built all kinds of things, particularly in FX, but in other areas as well, in other asset classes. Sometimes, you know, even in slightly odd and obscure asset classes like second-hand cars or these kinds of things. But primarily, you know, large financial organizations get us to help them with creating trading systems that go through the web usually.
Yeah.
But we're also, you know, these days mobile is incredibly important as well. So, you know, we're there too. We've got a client in Asia that's cross-asset on a mobile phone app, retail users, hundreds of thousands of retail users, these kinds of things, we're doing that too.
There's so much interesting things, particularly over the last couple of years, where things have developed so much around the space, where we're seeing new asset classes, as you say, and new opportunities and different demands from customers that are coming in there, and more complex environments as well, right? So as we're seeing all of those different things come through, you guys, you know, from what I've seen and been observing over the last couple of years, have adapted with that as well. Talk to us about some of the areas where you've seen innovation and opportunity over those last couple of years.
I mean, innovation is a huge area, and it's very interesting to me. So I suppose one of the things that we see a lot of innovation in, particularly working in web and the front end, is just the ecosystem is changing the whole time.
Yeah.
That's actually caused us various problems because, like I say, in 2006, Caplin was doing stuff that nobody else was doing. And gradually over time, there've been tools and the ecosystem has grown. And so we've had to start understanding that we can't invent everything.
Yeah.
Well, we can invent everything, but it no longer makes sense for us to think of ourselves as you know, 100% the whole world. We have to take the best ideas from outside.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of innovation around design systems, UI toolkits, these kinds of things. And you know, our customers are all interested in this stuff too. They have their own ideas about how they want things to fit together. and we have to accommodate that.
That customer listening is really interesting as well, isn't it? And within that UI space, there are challenges with building UIs, particularly in siloed organisations. I know that's something that's come up a lot in your world before. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose if I think back to working in large organisations, they often feel a lot more like a number of small companies, and sometimes those companies are competing with each other. It's almost like kingdoms warring sometimes. Yeah. And you can look at that and you can say, it's all very political. It's people should be on the same side. But actually, a lot of it is perfectly understandable. A lot of it is, especially if you're trying to build something multi-asset.
Yeah.
So of course they're going to have different organisations concentrating and focusing and building that deep knowledge in the different assets. So it becomes very challenging to try and tie that all together. You get often things come down from above, and it's a big kind of initiative, and there's various ways of dealing with it. There's I think what we've often worked with is you have a single implementation team, and everything goes through that implementation team. And that can be a good way of kind of centralizing it and making sure that things are consistent, because that's what you're really looking for, especially in the UI. You want that consistency.
Yeah.
It's very difficult when you're pulling from all kinds of different areas.
And tailoring it, I guess, as well at the same time.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So, but there's the challenge there, of course, because if you allow each of these different groups to tailor it, you'll end up with something that doesn't feel cohesive and coherent.
Yeah.
So, like I say, I've worked in a few different models. You can bring it all through a central implementation team. You can, these days in particular, it's quite good to have a central UX team that are creating a design language that everybody then uses.
Yeah.
So this is really good as well. When we can't do that kind of thing, we've started looking at some of the approaches out there now that are more common, things like micro front ends. But yeah, it's always a challenge. If you've got a siloed organisation, we can work there, we can do great things, but it is always a challenge.
And that challenge is driven by each customer, as you say, individually and bespoke and tailored to them. And I think that versatility and that ability to listen to the customer and provide the solutions based around what they're looking for has been probably fundamental to the growth of most companies in the space. Is that something which you've seen as well, that's worked for you over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I suppose, I don't know if you've probably come across Conway's Law.
Yeah.
That software gets built, the architecture of the software gets built that mimics the architecture of the organisation. So in some ways it's a big challenge, because you have to make your software work even in these situations where you've got a complicated organisation.
Yeah.
You don't want the software to end up complicated. But in some ways, software itself can be something that provides the impetus for organisational restructuring as well.
Yeah.
And we see that as well sometimes, that customers need to change the way they think about how they're structured, or certainly banks need to change the way they think about how they're structured in order to create the best solution.
Yeah. And the other thing we've seen exploding over the last couple of years has been sort of the rise of cloud and managed services. Cloud's obviously been growing for a long time, but it's I guess its real adoption has been gaslighted over the last couple of years, where people have needed to adapt to it a little bit more. Managed services, again, something people have moved into with greater vigour than ever before over the last couple of years. I know you guys are entrenched in that space as well. Tell us a little bit about Caplin and cloud and managed service.
Yeah, I suppose the thing that for me is particularly exciting about what we're doing in managed services is not just, yes, customers are very interested in cost savings, obviously, but it's also things like aligning our incentives more. So since we've started doing managed services, we've created all kinds of tools that make our deployments much easier, that make diagnosing problems much easier and quicker, these kinds of things, measuring uptime, and this stuff was always useful. Before we started doing managed services, it was the kind of thing that we did our bit, here's the software, you deploy it, you work out how to manage it, we'll help you, of course, because we're professional and we want you to succeed.
Yeah.
But this whole thing where we can now get economies of scale by creating tools that work across all of our deployments and make things faster and more efficient, that makes it better for us, it makes things better for our customer.
Yeah.
And also, something I'm very keen on is that when we make improvements, at the moment it's often quite a slow process to get those improvements, those upgrades out to the end users, because if we create something and then we make a version, we release it, and then the customer has to integrate it and test it, and they might have all kinds of complicated windows in which they're allowed to push stuff and release stuff, and that can be really quite a long process.
Yeah.
In the cloud, where we have control over the managed service, we're able to go through that process much quicker. We still have the testing, all of that kind of stuff, but it is much quicker and more flexible for us and for our customers.
And so it's that efficiency and that speed that are driving the course, and I guess the word that keeps on coming up over the last couple of years has been the reduction of friction, making the process easier and more straightforward. I think it's interesting you talk about the ease of both parts of that, because there's a lot of people who are talking about the speed and efficiency for the customer, but also for you guys, and being able to provide a much better solution is a real benefit to all of this as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when we create something, we want people using it. We want people using the latest stuff. We don't want there to be loads of friction. And making sure that friction is now kind of our problem to solve and to fix, I think that's a huge benefit. And making sure that when we make those improvements, we can roll them out so quickly.
Yeah. And that's the beauty, I think, of everything that we're seeing at the moment. Within that, there's obviously big scale teams behind it, and I know your background as director of engineering is putting together good and efficient teams and making them as efficient as possible within that too. Talk to me about organising teams with so many different things and so many different challenges and opportunities and I guess innovation, going back to that word. So many different areas of things to get in, to organise teams into various different areas. Tell us about some of the challenges, opportunities, successes you've seen in that space.
I think, well, to start with innovation, I think the natural state of a kind of skilled, interesting engineer, and we look for skilled, interesting engineers when we're hiring, the natural state for them is to be innovative.
Yeah.
And it's relatively hard to kind of squash that out of them. So I think when companies are worried that they feel like they're not being innovative enough, I think probably what's happening is either their engineering team is so stressed that they can't indulge their natural instinct for innovation, or they are secretly being innovative and nobody's noticing.
Yeah.
I definitely saw that in some large organisations that I've been in, where I've seen people doing all kinds of crazy, interesting, out there, innovative work that would have real business value, and it just being completely ignored.
Yeah.
So I think that's the key. That first of all, you hire the right people. They're going to be doing innovative stuff, whether you even really want them to or not.
Yeah.
So there's just kind of innovation bubbling the whole time. I mean, there's things you can do to encourage it. One of the main ways that you encourage it is obviously you hire for it, you value it. These kinds of things. I think showing that you value it and that you provide time for it, and that all through the management chain, we're looking for these ideas and we're using them. We have all kinds of things in our products that started as dev days.
Yeah.
We have, we call them self-directed project days now.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that people understand it's not just for developers.
Yeah, yeah.
We have every 4 weeks, we have a Friday set aside, do something, and it's self-directed. And as I say, interesting, smart people will be doing innovation in those days.
This is sort of like Google's 20% time stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I know that they've sort of pioneered that, or certainly taken credit for that sort of thing. But it's about putting people in there. And I love the fact that what you just said there, that this isn't just about developers. This is about everyone having ideas that can drive business further forward. And I think a lot of the most innovative companies that I've seen over the last couple of years have given that sort of trust and control and opportunity out to hire clever people, get out of their way, as the old things, and say, look, let's see what we can create. There's some really brilliant examples of that that come through businesses that I've been speaking to. Talk to us about how it's worked for you guys, the tangible things, because it's a nice thing to do to attract good people into the business, but is it actually bringing that genuine innovation to it, which is usable as well, and making an impact to customers?
Yeah, 100%. So, for example, one of the recent ones was our core messaging server, Liberator, which it's written in C, very high performance. One of the recent dev days was it was taken and ported to ARM architecture, which since all the cloud providers are starting to provide ARM servers, high performance, much cheaper. We think this is going to be really, really valuable for us.
Yeah.
I can go back, even back years ago when I was a developer, we were doing this, although perhaps less strictly. Actually, it was a hack day, which is slightly different for us.
The evolution of the hack day we're talking.
Yeah, well, it's not just that. We have our self-directed project days, and then every 6 months we also do a hack day, which is a little bit more competitive. There are prizes, these kinds of things. So for one of those, we did back then. I don't know if you were sort of aware of this kind of web streaming technology stuff, but back then it was Comet and Ajax and these kinds of things. And WebSockets was a kind of brand new thing. These days, almost everything we do is WebSockets.
Yeah.
Well, underneath, it's using WebSockets. So the first switch to using WebSockets was done on a hack day.
I love that. And I think this is so brilliant, because this sort of feeds into something I'm really passionate about. You mentioned it before about hiring good people and breeding that sort of sense of innovation from having good people around it. We also know, as we were talking about beforehand, that this has never been a more competitive space. Everyone is looking for smart, I think you said smart, interesting people, didn't you?
Yeah.
As the in an understaffed sector, where there is a overcoined term, but the war for talent at the moment. Companies are going out there to say, look, let's get that employer value proposition out there. Let's look at why we're a great place to work. Now, I've known Caplin for a long time, and within that, it's always been seen as a great place to work. You guys have traditionally been very, very good at hiring and retaining really strong talent in the space, and returning really strong talent in the space as well. So tell me a little bit about how you're nurturing that. Engineering talent being such a premium at the moment. What does make it a great place to work? And look, that sort of ability to influence and impact, I know, is a massive thing. The autonomy there to go out there and have a real impact on things that are happening out there in the marketplace, and having a real impact to customers and solving really interesting problems, I think it's a fascinating place to start. But tell me a little bit about that story and how you're attracting great talent at the moment.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So you've got to have a base of providing interesting work. Otherwise, you're never going to get the people. The other thing is, of course, it's a self-reinforcing cycle. If you have interesting people want to come and work.
Yeah. Good people know good people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there is all that aspect, but then there's other stuff as well. And I think particularly, in these kinds of lockdown times, it has been a challenge to try to keep up the culture and awareness of how the whole company is supporting you and looking to give you opportunities. So I think the kind of social aspect has been challenging for us over lockdown. We've had events. We do, we have a company stand-up every week, these kinds of things. But I do think that one of the things, I know when you spoke to Steve, he talked about how we'd reorganised just shortly before lockdown, actually. Yeah. We'd reorganised around small teams that stayed together. And I do think that's been massively important for our success in looking after people. The way I think of things is, the team is the unit of success. It's not really individuals, it's a team, it's a strong team. And the team reinforces and supports itself and each other. And we've given each team quite a bit of autonomy. So as you were saying, it's not just autonomy around having times when you can push your ideas forwards yourself, but it's also things around, telling the teams, here's your budget, do some interesting team events together, these kinds of things, build those relationships.
And within those, you're right, because it's been difficult, hasn't it? Creating that sort of culture's so important to any business, and I think certain companies really got that right over the last couple of years about how they maintained that sort of the vision, the messaging, the communication, and such like. And certain companies have sort of almost gone backwards into a shell and had silos, effectively individuals working for a business, and I think there's very common terminology at the moment about the Great Resignation as things start go back to normal, and we're going to see an exodus of businesses. But I think those kind of people in businesses, I think what we're seeing is companies now who are starting to look at that and have thought about that all the way through the process, and are going to get far more buy-in and loyalty from having made sure that they've been looking after their people all the way through that. I know that's something you guys have put a big premium on as well, right? Yeah,
I think, one of the things about loyalty is that having a company that is loyal to you
Mm.
creates loyalty in the worker, and that was true for me. I
Yeah.
told you when I first joined Caplin, this is a couple of months. I'm going to go do my masters. I still went and did my masters.
Yeah.
But when I went and did my masters, Caplin said, "Look, whatever hours you can do while you're doing your masters, we'll pay you to do. Come and do them."
Amazing.
And that, of course, that was why I stayed 8 years.
Yeah.
Because despite only expecting it to be 3 months,
Yeah.
because I appreciated that trust and opportunity that gave me. And I think as we give people flexibility, as we understand where they're at, we've got somebody who's moved for a year to, I think, Thailand,
Okay.
making use of the flexibility that we've given them.
Yeah.
I'm sure that stuff breeds loyalty.
And with regards to that, your sort of comeback and going through, what prompted that to happen? I mean, obviously you left there, and you were out for what, 3-4 years or so, I think, was it?
Oh, it was. I'd have to work it out. It was a couple of years at Improbable, then a few years at Deutsche Bank. So it was probably about 6 years.
So out for a little bit. What was the draw? What persuaded you to say that this is where I'm coming home?
It's a bit, well. So as always with these kinds of situations, there were a lot of factors. One of the factors was just that I knew the people. I knew that it was a place where work was respected, people were respected. Interesting people worked there on interesting problems. So obviously that was a huge draw. The other thing was that I felt that given the situation, as we talked about during the kind of interview process, I thought this is a place where I can help, I can make a difference. So I think that was a big draw as well.
Yeah, that again, it goes back to that magic thing, doesn't it, of making a difference and being able to move forwards in interesting problems that are making a difference to the wider economy as well. So look, there's lots of exciting things happening for the team at the moment. There's lots of good people who are working together to point in a direction of growth and opportunity for the business. What's exciting? What comes up for Caplin?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of really interesting opportunities. A lot of the things that we want to do are around being a really good partner to our clients, making sure that they're able to do. We talked about innovation. We want to make sure that the companies that work with us are able to kind of realize their dreams. When we understand how difficult that is, often in those kinds of situations, but we can provide that extra help that I think people need. So there's that aspect. There's all kinds of interesting things technically as well happening around working out the best way for us to build applications. A lot of new technology around at the moment. These kinds of things.
And who should, when you're looking at this and expanding that team, what sort of people are you looking to bring on board? How do you, I know you say smart and interesting, but what does that look like, and who should be reaching out to you?
So, I mean, we often have roles open at the moment, but we're looking for people who are, yes, smart. And I think the interesting thing is interesting, right? Because it isn't just purely about technical skill. It's also, again, if it comes back to innovation. Innovation so often comes from these kinds of interesting ideas that get fertilized from elsewhere.
Yeah.
So we want people to have that kind of intellectual curiosity in a wide area.
Yeah.
It makes the workplace more interesting,
Definitely.
but it also provides those kind of extra ideas for innovation to spark. So yes, definitely people like that. Partly because of the kind of structure of the teams, with these small teams that are, as far as possible, cross-stack. It is nice to have individuals who are keen to explore across the whole stack, add value wherever the value needs to be added. This was certainly my experience as a developer at Caplin. I was valuable when I only really knew one thing, but then once I'd learned the whole stack, I was so much more valuable. And it wasn't just about value to the business, although it was that.
Yeah.
It was also in hack days, in dev days, I could take an idea and I could run with it and create it. And that's actually the whole point of cross-stack teams. It's not really, we want them to be cross-stack because that's just a good thing. It's that the team needs to be able to deliver. And if the team needs to wait on other teams because they don't have the specific skill and some other package has got to be updated and things have got to be changed. Everything just slows down, grinds to a halt, takes ages. Sometimes, you come across these crazy stories of changes that would literally require 15 minutes taking weeks. Yeah. This hasn't happened to me at Caplin, but I've seen it happen in other places. So that's why teams need to be cross-stack, because anything else becomes much more, just so much more friction.
Yeah.
So when we hire people, we're looking for people who can, and this is another thing that's worked really well with the teams. We now have teams, we're hiring people into teams that are stable. We have more of a sense of what kinds of skills will round out that team.
Yeah.
The full stack engineer is someone to us that we really want to attract.
Yeah.
They fit so well into our teams. If somebody is looking for interesting work, they aren't. So this is part of it, right? That a strong engineer, a strong developer, isn't really somebody who's like learned jQuery to call back to such a level that that's all they can do, and then they're stuck. When the industry moves on, it's somebody who understands code, who can solve problems with code, and they can work in all kinds of different frameworks and languages. That's the kind of person we're looking for. That isn't kind of hung up on one particular technology or language. It's somebody who loves learning and who will apply the technology.
I think you're absolutely right. It's those people who are wedded to one particular way of doing things, I think is it's one dimensional in terms of their future as much as anything else, right? If you're there and you're pigeonholed, and we see this quite a lot in major enterprise end user organisations, where you have people there who are very, very good at what they know, but they're pigeonholed then into what they can be and where they become. And I think with businesses like yours, you've got that diversity of thought, diversity of thinking. You've got people there who are able to get themselves into loads of different areas, which makes them really attractive, not only for today, but also for their career. Because look, we're the custodians of people for however long they're with that business. We want to make sure that they go in a better spot to move on and develop their career. Hopefully it's with your organisation forever, but you want to improve people to move into it. And that's where I think retention sits as well at the same time. It's been fantastic talking to you. Thanks so much for sharing all of it. For people who are out there, who should be talking to you guys at the moment? From a client side, from a person who wants to join you, who should reach out, and what's the best way of them getting in touch with you?
There's always the website, caplin.com. Anyone remotely interested in financial trading systems through the web, through mobile, they should definitely be talking to us. Anyone interested in a job, definitely let us know. You can email me, adam.iley@caplin.com, or as I say, positions are available on the caplin.com website.
Fantastic. We'll tag you in on all of the LinkedIn stuff that goes out, and it's been brilliant having you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.